Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have part 3 of Secrets by Jacqueline Wilson, continuing from chapter 5, Treasure. I do love it at my nan's. I'm really, truly staying forever. I've even started school here. I did wonder if it was just a holiday visit in spite of Nan's reassurances. She asked me on New Year's Day if I was missing my mum. I said no, not at all. It isn't exactly true. I dream about her every night. Terry's in the dream too, and he's hitting her, and I can't stop him. And then he's hitting me. Sometimes I'm screaming when I wake up. I think about Mum during the day too, especially when I make Nan a cup of tea. I settle her down while she's sipping, slip her high heels off, and give her a foot massage. That's what I always did to give Mum a little treat. I am the bee's knees at foot massage. I know how to pull the tights gently at the end so the toes can wriggle around. I stroke each toe individually and then spend ages on the instep because that's the bit where it really aches. Nan makes exactly the same little purring sounds that Mum does. I think about Mum in the evenings too. Terry's always out at the pub then, so why doesn't she phone me? I got so scared he'd really gone for her, maybe put her in hospital. I waited until Nan was out giving a dancing lesson, and then I phoned home. My fingers were so divery, I could hardly tap out the number. I heard the phone ringing and ringing. I closed my eyes tight, the blood beating in my eyelids. Then Mum suddenly said, "Hello," right in my ear. She sounded bright and bouncy, like she didn't have a care in the world. She didn't sound like she was missing me one bit. I swallowed, trying to get my mouth wet enough to speak. I heard Bethany in the background say, "Who is it, Mum?" It was like a punch in the stomach. I'm sure Bethany never called her Mum before. I slammed the phone down quick without saying a word. I waited. She didn't dial 1471. She didn't ring back. I'm not going to ring her again. There's no point now. I know she's all right. She's got Bethany and Kyle to watch out for her. Terry won't turn on them because he's their dad, so it's all worked out wonderfully well. It has. When Nan came home all hot and happy from her dancing, I put my arms right around her neck. "Promise I can stay here forever, Nan?" She laughed. "Yes, I promise. How many more times, my little treasure?" She picked me up and I wound my legs tight around her waist as if I was a baby Brittany. Then Nan whirled me around and round the living room, going, "My little treasure, my gold rings, my silver bangles, my flashy diamond, my sparkly sapphire, my red ruby." Patsy capered up by her side, doing a little Irish jig, her skirt flying up to show her frilly knickers. I can fit into Patsy's school uniform, just. Nan's going to buy me my own skirt and blouse soon, and some out-of-school clothes too. New trousers and tops and a winter coat because I've only got my old brown fleece, and it's so rubbed I look like a jumble sale teddy. But I'll have to wait a bit because she's already had to fork out for my wonderful new designer glasses, so she's a bit strapped for cash at the moment. I felt strange when Nan took me to the school. Patsy's blouse is very tight under my armpits, and her pleated skirt shows a lot of my skinny legs. Patsy's only got one school jumper, so I wore one of Willie's, even though it's way too big. I spent ages puffing out my fringe so that the Terry scar didn't show. The stitches are out now, but it still looks a horrible zigzag mess. Nan watched me combing and looked like she might be going to cry. "I've a good mind to shop that pig into the police after all," she said. "Don't, Nan. He'll only take it out on Mum." "Not if he's put behind bars where he belongs." Nan shook her head. "It's so swear word ironic." She closed her eyes tight for a moment to keep the tears in. I patted her gently on her shoulder. Nan's boyfriend, Pete, Patsy's dad, is behind bars. He's a really lovely, kind man. Even Willie and Loretta think the world of him. Nan's nuts about him. He's crazy about her too. That's how he got into trouble. He got involved in this fight in a bar, getting stuck in to protect my Nan because some drunk guy started chatting her up. Pete was holding his glass in his hand, and the drunk guy got really bad. So badly cut that he died. So Pete's doing time for manslaughter. Nan goes to visit him every month. She's got half a gold heart locket that she wears around her neck. Pete wears the other half. It's dead romantic. Nan misses him very badly, but she keeps it all inside most of the time. I told her she should have a good weep if she wanted to, as it would do her good to let her emotions out. Nan roared with laughter instead and said I was a scream. At least it cheered her up a bit. We went off to school, Nan and Patsy and me. Willie goes to the comprehensive and Loretta doesn't go to school at all now. She's got Brittany. I felt a bit shy when we went into the playground, especially as all Patsy's friends were crowding around and everyone was wondering who I was, the weird kid with the wrong size clothes. "This is my treasure," said Nan, like she was really proud of me. That made me feel great, even though some of the kids sniggered at my name. Nan led me inside the school. Patsy gave me a quick kiss for good luck. Then I was taken to the head teacher, Mrs. Parker. This is my granddaughter, Treasure. She's living with me now, said Nan, giving my shoulder a squeeze. I've come to enrol her at Latimer. I thought I might have to do a test, English and maths maybe, but Mrs. Parker put my name on the register right away, and I was given a class. They all stared at me when I walked in. I stared right back, my eyes swivelling round and round. I always look out for someone to be my special friend, but I haven't found her yet. The kids at the top of the class with shiny hair and tidy uniform always edge away, like they'll be nibbled by nits if they get near me. The scruffy kids with stains all over their sweatshirts can't stick me either because I'm swotty and they act like they're stupid. Sometimes the teachers like me, sometimes they don't. They called me Miss Know-It-All at my last school. I heard them discussing me in the staff room. This new teacher, Miss Strand, is a bit dubious. She thinks I'm thick. She tells me stuff very slowly, and she keeps saying I mustn't worry if I can't do the work. It's a wonder she hasn't stuck me at the back with a colouring book like the kids with learning difficulties. She had problems with my name too, her lip curling every time she said it, like she was trying not to laugh. The kids are a pain about it too. I have a new nickname. Not in the least original. Buried. You think you've got problems with your name, Treasure, said Willie when we were having tea. What kind of a nut calls their son Willie? A hard nut, so less of the cheek, said Nan, pretending to bop him one. Did those kids really give you a rough time, Treasure? No worries, Nan. I'm used to it. It's always like this when I start at a new school, I said, wolfing down my egg and bacon and sausage and tomatoes and mushrooms and chips. I can't get over how wonderful the food is at Nan's. She cooks it all herself. No running down to the chippy for her. She's teaching me to cook too. I was the sausage girl tonight, and Nan said they were perfect. Well done, but not the slightest bit burnt. How many schools have you been to, Treasure? Nan asked. Oh, goodness, I don't know, Nan. Heaps, I said. Mum's lived all over the place, with all different blokes. Each time she gets a new guy, there's a new home and a new school. It's awful, always being the new girl, and never remembering all the names of everyone in my new class. I get to know the girls, who start picking on me first. It's never the boys. They leave me alone. But there's nearly always a little group of girls who corner me in the cloakrooms, shove me in the corridors, trip me in the playground. It's okay, I can cope. I might be puny, but I'm powerful. I'm not too great at punching, but I can give a hard whack if necessary. I mostly just say stuff. I give them a verbal version of the Terry tortures, and they reel backwards. Sometimes they cry, even the really mean, tough ones. Then they leave me alone. But that's okay, too. It is. I like my own company. School doesn't matter that much anyway. It's home that counts. I get up really, really early sometimes, when everyone else is still asleep, even little Brittany. I pad softly around the house in my bare feet, so happy that it's my home and I live here. I stroke the smooth leather sofa in the living room. I rub my cheek on the gold velvet cushions. I curl up my toes in the black and white furry rug, and I run my finger up and down the big yellow lava lamp. I love that lamp, and the slow, sure, steady way the oil wafts up and down. I peep in at everyone while they're asleep. My family. Patsy always curls up in a neat little ball with a blue rabbit on one side and a squat koala on the other. I like it that she's got her cuddly toys. She doesn't really play with them, though. She hasn't even given them proper names. They're just Bunny and Bear. It's a wonder Patsy doesn't call me Girl. Willie doesn't sleep curled up, and he certainly doesn't have any cuddly toys. He lies flat on his back with his arms flung out and his feet sticking out of the duvet. There's always a fug of old sock in the room, so I don't linger long. He'd go berserk if he knew I'd been peeping in at him. One time he nicked his duvet right off and I saw him in his underpants. Loretta sometimes sleeps in her underwear too, but she's got pretty slinky petticoats, so she looks fine, though she's always got black circles from her eye makeup, which spoils the effect a bit. Brittany sleeps in a cot at the end of the bed. She wears a dear little yellow toweling suit with a yellow dummy to match. She makes little sucking sounds every now and then. She's so sweet. I often tiptoe into the kitchen and make up her bottle for when she wakes, around 6. Then I make a cup of tea and take it to Nan. She looks so lovely when she's in bed. Her long blonde hair spreads out all over the pillow, and she wears fancy black lacy nighties, so she looks just like a film star, even though her face has got a few wrinkles. My laughter line, says Nan. It's true, she's always laughing. It makes you feel so good, so safe, so happy. When I wake her, she never yells at me or pushes me away. She smiles like she's really pleased to see me. Hello, my little treasure, she says. She props herself up on her pink pillow to sip her tea. I slip in beside her and cuddle up close. I can't understand my mum. Why did she ever want to leave home? Why did she go off with all the horrible boyfriends? She didn't even know my dad properly, so I can't get to know him myself. Not that I care. I haven't liked any of my stepdads, so I expect my real dad is just as bad. and Terry is the worst ever. I wish I could stop dreaming that he's coming to get me. Chapter 6. India. Dear Kitty, I hate school. I hate all the teachers. I hate all the girls. I particularly hate Maria and Alice. They raise their eyebrows and then sputter with laughter whenever I go near them. The other girls have started doing it too, and everyone groans whenever I answer in class. I can't help knowing lots. What's so bad about being clever? I wish I didn't have to go to school. Maybe I'll bunk off and creep back home and hide in the attic all day like a real Anne Frank. I got into trouble because of my darling Anne today. I was so excited because we're doing diaries in English, and Mrs. Gibbs started talking about Anne Frank. She read out an excerpt from the diary. I felt my face flushing, as if she were reading out my diary. I couldn't stand it that some of the girls were just messing around and not paying attention when they were being introduced to the most important book of the 20th century. It is so insulting to Anne. I couldn't bear it. Mrs. Gibbs read on, her voice solemn and portentous. So wrong for lively, passionate Anne. Some of the girls started giggling, while I fidgeted miserably to try to distract myself from the Gibbs rendition. I ended up slumped right down in my desk, my hands over my ears. India? I jumped. I'd filtered out her voice like a little too effectively. What's the matter with you? Aren't you even listening? Mrs. Gibbs gave me a wounded look. I would have thought you of all people would be interested in Anne Frank. I am. Then please sit up properly and concentrate. Mrs. Gibbs trudged on through Anne's delicate prose, selecting the passage which means most to me, the one where Anne desperately longs for a real friend. I listened in agony. Alice whispered some crass remark, and Maria spluttered infuriatingly. Really, girls, said Mrs. Gibbs, closing Anne's diary with a snap, can't you be a little more mature? Maria, it's not funny. I'm sure, sorry, Mrs. Gibbs, said Maria, struggling. So what happened to Anne Frank? Did she stay hidden in her secret annex till the war ended? Mrs. Gibbs adjusted her glasses, rubbing the lenses with the bottom of her cardigan. Her eyes looked horribly pink and naked without them. I'm afraid Anne's story has a sad ending. Her family were caught and sent away to a concentration camp. This is like a concentration camp, Alice hissed. Maria giggled. I stood up, cheeks flaming. How can you be so stupid? I shouted. India, said Mrs. Gibbs. They were all staring at me. I was living up to my red hair at last. I felt as if I was on fire. The concentration camps were the most terrible places ever. Haven't you heard of gas chambers? Nearly everyone died there. You were sent in cattle trucks, stuck in the dark for days. People often died on the journey. When you got there, they divided you all up into families. Anne wasn't allowed to stay with her father, and you were stripped naked, and... That's enough, India, said Mrs. Gibbs. And your head was shaved, and then you were kept in terrible, squalid, freezing old huts with hardly any food at all, just rotten scraps, and so everyone got terrible illnesses. Anne's mother died, and then her sister Margot died, and so poor Anne was all on her own, and she got typhoid too, and then she died in agony. India! Mrs. Gibbs got hold of me by the shoulders and pushed me down in my seat. Will you be quiet? But it's true. I know it is, but I don't think we should dwell on things in quite such a ghoulish way. You're upsetting the other girls. But we should feel upset. Anne died. 6 million Jews died. Yes, I know. It was terrible, but it was a long time ago. It's silly to cry about it now. I wiped my eyes fiercely with the back of my hand. I stuck my chin out to show I wasn't one little bit ashamed of crying. Mrs. Gibbs sighed and then carried on with the lesson. She stopped talking about Anne. She moved hastily on to Samuel Pepys. When the bell went for home time, she called me back to have a word with her. I'm sorry you got upset in class, India, she said. I'm very impressed that you know so much about Anne Frank. You've obviously been moved by her story. But I can't have you shouting like that in the classroom. But the others were being so stupid. They were laughing and messing about. I know, India, it's very annoying. But you mustn't mind so much. You feel things so intensely, dear. It's a little unnerving. I don't think I feel too much. I think other people don't feel enough. But I know this is the reason most people don't like me. It's not just Maria and Alice. All the other girls think I'm odd. Even Miranda, who really did used to be my best friend. Frequently declared I was seriously weird. Mum is always sighing and telling me not to be such a drama queen. Wanda tells me to lighten up. Dad used to pick me up and shake me until I squealed. It was a game to shake all my worries away. We haven't played that for ages. Maybe it's because I've got too big. Or maybe even Dad doesn't like me anymore. I started crying again in front of Mrs. Gibbs. I was remembering another game Dad used to play. He would curl his fingers into a spanner shape and gently touch my eyelids, making little wrenching sounds. We'd better fix the washer on this funny little tear gap, he'd say, and it would make me stop crying and laugh instead. It's as if that Dad has left home and a grumpy stranger has moved into his body. What is it now, India? Said Mrs. Gibbs. Come on, try not to be such a baby. I'm not telling you off. I'm just trying to have a little chat with you. I know, I mumbled, sniffing. Haven't you got a hanky, dear? India, things are all right at home, aren't they? I jumped. You know you can always talk to me, don't you? Is there anything really worrying you? I clicked on various images in my mind. Dad, Mum, Wanda. I scrolled down each long list of worries. I couldn't decide which to highlight. The dad dilemma was in the boldest font, but I didn't want to tell Mrs. Gibbs about him. He's still the most special person in all the world to me, apart from Anne. It would seem horribly disloyal if I started whining about him. I didn't mind whining about Mum, but this is a non-starter. Mrs. Gibbs reveres her. She's always going on about her success and her stupid, simpering appearances on breakfast television. Mum was even on Blue Peter once with Phoebe. I wondered about telling Mrs. Gibbs what Mum's really like, but it's hard to put into words, even if you're extremely articulate, perhaps a little precociously so. That was Mrs. Gibbs' comment on my school report at Christmas. Mum doesn't do anything bad to me. She doesn't say anything either. It's the way she says it, the way she sighs, the way she raises her eyebrows, the way she rushes straight past me, talking over her shoulder, the way she never wants to sit down and talk to me. If I try to grab hold of her and start gabbling, she always goes, "Oh, darling, I'm in such a tearing rush. Can you ask Wanda?" Wanda's no use whatsoever, especially recently. She just stays in her room most of the time. She doesn't even go out with Susie anymore. I don't think they're friends now. Wanda hasn't got any other friends. I'd be her friend, but she barely takes any notice of me. I wondered about having a good moan to Mrs. Gibbs about Wanda, but I couldn't be bothered. Besides, Mrs. Gibbs might have a word with Mum, and then Wanda would get into trouble. Then I'd be for it. Wanda's got those pointy long nails, and it really hurts when she pinches. No, everything's fine at home, really, I said, sighing. Mrs. Gibbs sighed too, and told me to perk up then, as if I was a jug of coffee. The cloakroom was empty when I got my coat. Everyone had gone home already. I trailed out across the playground, expecting Wanda to nag at me for keeping her waiting, but Wanda wasn't there. She wasn't standing by the gate, leaning on the wall, wandering up and down the pavement. I looked for the car, but it wasn't parked anywhere. I wondered if Wanda had nipped along to the corner shop for some chocolate. I went to have a look. She wasn't there either. I bought myself a Mars bar king size and ate it in 5 gollops while I wondered what to do. I could go back to school and tell Mrs. Gibbs. I could find a phone box and ring home. I could ring for a taxi. I could stand outside the school waiting and waiting and waiting. I could walk home by myself. I thought about it. I knew the way. It wasn't that far. It would only take 20 minutes, half an hour at the most. So I set off, my school bag bumping on my back. It felt as if I was starting out on an adventure. I enjoyed the feeling. Maybe I wouldn't go home. Maybe I'd walk off into the wide world and seek my fortune. No, I didn't want to sound like a fairy tale. I wanted to be part of a stark modern drama. I played a tragic runaway, picked up by a wicked man who kept me captive and forced me to submit to his evil intentions. Wait a minute, little girl. A fat man suddenly grabbed hold of me. I gave a little squeak of terror. You nearly walked right out into the road, he puffed, his sausage fingers still splayed on my shoulders. You could have stepped straight under a lorry. You were in a right old daydream. I'm sorry, I stammered and rushed off, in the wrong direction. I felt such a fool. I kept on running. I looked around quickly as I turned the corner, just to make sure he wasn't following me. He wasn't the wicked man of my fantasy, just a kind grandad in a too-tight bomber jacket trying to stop me getting run over. But I felt I couldn't be too careful. I couldn't see him, but I didn't want to retrace my footsteps just in case he bobbed back again. I'd have to trail right into town and go the really long way home, unless, of course, I took a shortcut through the Latimer estate. I did a local history project last year and found out that the Latimer estate used to be the Latimer Woods, and all this woodland belonged to the big manor house, Parkfield. Only all the woods got chopped down and built on in Victorian times, and then in the 60s all the little Victorian back-to-backs got pulled down and they built this vast tower block, council estate, Parkfield Manor. Parkfield Manor got pulled down and they built all our houses. We don't get called an estate, we're a luxury complex. The Latimer estate is very big, very bleak and very tough. I'd never actually walked through it, but we drive past sometimes. Mum always winds up the windows and locks the car door from inside in case any of the Latimer estate kids charge up at the traffic lights, stick their hands through the window and try to grab her Rolex watch. It's only an imitation one she got in Hong Kong when she went there on a business trip, but it looks real. No one's ever tried to steal her watch. The only time anyone's approached the car, it was to wash the windows, and even then they backed off quick when Dad flipped his hands and mouthed at them. But Mum and Dad talked about the Latimer estate as if it's a suburb of hell itself. It's all feckless single mums on drugs and gangs of yobs, says Mum. Drunks and dropouts, the lot of them. I don't know why they don't round them all up and shove them in jail, says Dad. Whenever we hear a police siren scream in the distance, they sigh and shake their heads and say, the Latimer estate. I hate it when they talk like that. My feet hurt in my hard school shoes and my bag was dragging on my shoulder. I didn't want to trail all the way into town. I decided to be daring. I'd walk through the Latimer estate all by myself. I set off, feeling like Little Red Riding Hood, setting off into the deep, dark Latimer woods. I walked very briskly, in spite of my sore feet, almost as if real wolves were after me. 2 old ladies hauling shopping trolleys and 3 mums with baby buggies, wheeling washing back from the laundrette, didn't look too scary. But as I got further into the estate, the stained concrete tower blocks, high above my head, I started to feel more wary. Something wet spattered on top of my head. It wasn't raining. I put my hand up gingerly to feel what it was. I heard a faraway giggle from one of the balconies. I was obviously a target in a spitting competition. I hurried on, looking up worriedly ever so often. It was bad enough being spat at. What if they started chucking things at me? Weren't they meant to have thrown an old television at a policeman only the other day? My own prissy private school uniform was reason enough for them to have a go at me. I huddled inside my duffel coat and walked on as fast as I could. Wibble wobble jelly bum! It was the sharp-faced little kid of about 6 shouting at me from the dustbin shelter. I tossed my head, ignoring him. He started yelling worse things, swear words I'd never heard said aloud before. Wash your mouth out with soap, I said. My voice sounded horribly posh and plummy. He screamed with laughter. I hurried on to the next block. There were bigger boys there, swooping around and round on skateboards, thundering up homemade chute, flying through the air and then crashing down on asphalt. I jumped each time they thumped, scuttling between them as they circled me. There was a girl cycling around, and around too, doing fantastic wheelie tricks on a BMX. She looked every bit as tough as the boys. Her hair tousled, a big red scar on her forehead, her face pale and pinched. She was so skinny in her tight jeans and tiny matted fleece. I stared at her enviously. She saw me staring. She stuck her tongue out at me. I waggled mine back at her. Then she grinned. I grinned. It was just as if we knew each other. And that is where we will leave part 3 of Secrets by Jacqueline Wilson. I'll be back soon with the next part of this fantastic story and lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.